All right, and we're back. We have a lot to cover this week. Samsung revealed their foldable Galaxy F phone. A leaker says the S10 will have an O-shaped camera cutout. Apple iPhone 10, Galaxy S9, and Xiaomi Mi 6 phones are all hacked in Tokyo. Uh, Comic book genius Stan Lee has passed away. We'll talk a little bit about that and give him a tribute. This week, we're going to debate which is better, Android or iPhone. I'm
The
going to take,
SmackDown.
yeah, the smackdown. And as well, tens of thousands of Google employees walk out in protest. So we've got a huge show today. I was just wondering, how are things going on your side of the planet, Matt?
Good. Yeah, we just had a long weekend. It was Remembrance Day, so that was nice. I played Axes and Allies Global Edition, which is like two big game boards put together that show the whole world. And we added it up probably about 16 hours. Not straight, thankfully, but we did Friday evening, Saturday, and then Monday. So yeah, it was a good weekend.
Did you ever take over the Ukraine and say, the Ukraine is strong?
I should have, but I did take over the Ukraine. I played the Soviet Union, and I wore my Soviet Union hat that I brought home from my years in Russia. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I found that when I wore the hat, I rolled better.
Oh, okay. How many
Yes.
sided die were you using and did it light up?
No, it wasn't that awesome. They're just regular dice and Axes and Allies, the regular six-sided die. But yeah,
Okay.
it was good times and super uber geeky Remembrance Day thing to do, especially as we celebrated 100 years since the end of World War One.
Yeah, and for all our fans in the United States, Remembrance Day is Veterans Day. And so, yeah, we celebrated it here too, and I wore my poppy. So,
Oh, that's good to wear your poppy. Did you see
yeah,
anybody else wearing a poppy?
it was just me. People had no
Just
idea
you.
what it meant over here. I was like, don't you watch international news? Everyone wears it, but
Yeah,
it's not really a thing here.
it's a
Meanwhile,
Commonwealth British
California
thing.
is burning down,
Oh
unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. Are
Yeah.
you caught up in that, Dan?
No, thankfully I'm about 45 minutes away, but it's sad. All of the beautiful places are burning. Why couldn't they burn the ugly places?
Are there ugly places in California?
I think I could find one or two. All
Nice.
right. So I wanted to start out here with the Galaxy F phone from Samsung.
Yeah.
It was cool. I saw some articles on this of them folding the phone. Do you want to talk a little bit about it and when we can expect it?
Yeah, it was really neat actually. For some reason at work, I just happened to have a little lull where I could log on and watch them live broadcast, and I logged in after all their little preamble that they advertised before, and just in time to see the VP pull out. It looked like this little book, and the lights all went dim, and he opened it up and you saw this big pictures go, and it was really cool. And you could tell that actually it was in a camouflaged case. So basically, they're not showing the full design of the phone right now. They're just showing that it opens up like a book. So there were a few different designs that they were mulling around. The first one is actually where it's the opposite of a book, where the screen is on the outside and then it folds, but you still have the screen on the outside. And the advantage of that design is you only have one screen. But the disadvantage is your screen is on the outside when it's folded and prone to scratches and issues like that, because you can't really put Gorilla Glass on a foldable screen to protect it from scratches. So
Right.
they talked about some of the materials that went into making it and how it's supposed to be scratch proof, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere as near as scratch proof as the typical regular phones that we have. So this one actually has two screens. So on the front screen, it's a 4.5-inch display, which is kind of small, like an old iPhone 4, maybe a little bit bigger, and it's 1960 by 840. And then you open it up, and it's a 7.3-inch screen, and it's 2152 by 1536. So it looked like a beautiful screen. It was neat when he showed the front, and it was on that little tiny screen. I was like, oh, that looks kind of lame. But then when he opened it up, as soon as he opened, it was like everything switched to the inside screen. And it could tell which screen you're looking at, and it would rotate, of course, like a regular phone would. So, all intents and purposes, it looked pretty neat. I'm not sure if I would fork out for it. So, here's the details. They're calling it the Galaxy F for Foldable.
Oh,
Foldable, not
but maybe not
affordable.
affordable, right?
That was not affordable. So it's going to release for 1,770 US dollars. Yeah, so super pricey. Comes out in March of 2019. Most likely it will be announced at CES 2019. But they're also going to be releasing the Galaxy S10 at the same time. So the Galaxy S10 most likely will come out in February, and then the Galaxy F, the foldable, will come out in March. So it'll be kind of this 1-2 Samsung punch early on in the year. So we'll see how that goes. Now, everybody's chasing the foldable phone. There was a really cheap working prototype that I saw online last week that was the outside one. And, you know, when it was open, it had this big crease in the middle and it just looked junky and ugly. And I was like, that is not something I'd want to buy. And apparently LG is going to be showing their version of a foldable phone also at CES. So Samsung's not necessarily going to be the first, but the prototype we saw last Wednesday looked pretty slick to me.
I have so many questions. First of all, it looked really thick to me. Like it looked
Yes.
like you couldn't slip it in your pocket. Like it looked
Yeah.
like a cereal box. You know, it was so big.
He did pull it out of his pocket though, which is cool. So he was wearing a jacket. You didn't really notice like a big lump or anything. And he pulled it out, and it kind of reminded me of when Steve Jobs brought
Yeah,
out the first MacBook Air. Remember when he did
out
that?
of the
And he,
manila envelope. Yeah.
yeah, out of the manila tag envelope. It was like your interoffice mail envelope, and we all went, "Oh, you put a laptop in there. That's amazing." So Samsung kind of did the same thing. But yeah, it looked like a thick book. But what's interesting is that was actually the camouflaged case. So I'm actually expecting this to look a little bit sleeker, a little bit sexier. And if you look at the patents that Samsung has, it's got a neat looking hinge on the patents. So I'm expecting it to look a little bit more like the Microsoft Pros, like the actual laptops, where their hinges are a little bit more wider and bigger. So, you know, we'll see how it looks, but it can't be that thin in your pocket because it's a folded phone.
Right. So talk to me more about the hinge. How are they going to get away with that and not have a crease down the middle?
I don't know, Dan. I don't know. And maybe that's why they went with the inside screen instead of the outside screen. But from the patent I saw, it actually, the hinge looked like it had two functional moving parts. So it's like a flat part in the middle, and then a hinge on this side, and then a hinge on the other side. And so it looks like it actually folds in two different spots to kind of protect it and keep it from having that lump in the middle or crease.
I hope everyone's watching on YouTube and seeing Matt's hand
Hands.
gestures. It folds like this.
Hey, Macarena.
Okay. So is this something that you would buy?
No, not a first gen, and I don't think many people will. I don't think Samsung's even expecting many people to buy this very first gen device. I think everybody's still trying to figure out what's it for, how useful is it going to be. But you know, if you look at a lot of things, like the very first VR that came out was super clunky, and it's getting slimmed down. So I think that as this device comes out, and people are going to start using the device, and then the form factor will get tweaked for uses that people are needing it for. So first gen, no. Maybe a third or fourth gen, depending on if the price comes down and if I actually see a use to having a bigger screen like that. But until then, I'm going to stick with my phablet.
Okay, that sounds great. I think one use I could see for me is using the front screen every day, and then when I lie down, maybe watching Netflix on the bigger screen.
Yeah, I mean, That real estate's useful. Professionally, in my work that I do, I often pull up drawings, pictures, isometrics. I pull them up on my phone, and having that screen real estate is really important. You can always zoom in and zoom in, but having that bigger picture is useful professionally. So I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this. But is it worth 1700?
1700.
Yeah.
No. Another leak came out this week. I see you have an article about the Samsung S10 that it's going to have an O-shaped camera cutout.
Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed about that because last week we talked about this UPS, which stands for under panel sensors, and it
Yes.
it really looked like the camera was going to work through the screen, which to me sounded like magical technology. Kind of takes us back to the original iPhone unveiling and Steve Jobs, this is a magical device, right? And it seemed magical. It was the internet in our pockets. And so this UPS technology sounded like magical. Unfortunately, at least this generation, they're calling it the Infinity O display. So
What is
Sam,
that? Yeah, what does that mean? Is that a notch?
yes, it's a notch. So it means they actually have a little tiny cutout that's just big enough for the camera piece itself. And that camera will be a little tiny notch. So it's still a notch as far as I'm concerned. Now it's
Right.
as minimalistic as it can be. We saw the teardrop notch in the OnePlus 6T, and I thought it looked pretty cool for a notch, even though I'm not a notch fan. And this gets even smaller. But I'm hoping, just fingers crossed, that the Note 10 that will come out in the fall of 2019 might just have this magical UPS under panel sensors that everybody's talking about.
Well, that's what I'd really like. And when you talked a little bit last week about the OnePlus 6T having the fingerprint reader under the screen, I mean that
Yes.
was so cool. That's so much better than having it on the back of the phone. And so it looks like maybe we'll have these third-party Android people doing it first. Maybe Samsung's not going to be the first to do it.
Well, the under fingerprint or under screen fingerprint scanner is already here in the OnePlus 6T.
Right.
Xiaomi's released a few, and so have some other smaller companies. But you
Notchless
know,
though.
not
That's what I'm
notchless.
talking about.
Yeah, not notchless. And I don't think we're going to see a full screen phone until maybe end of 2019 and maybe even into 2020. But we're getting closer.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about security
Yeah.
today. So they just had a conference in Tokyo called Pwn to Own, and they actually hacked the iPhone 10, the Samsung Galaxy S9, and the Xiaomi Mi 6, and
Ooh.
they did it really, really fast. Um, so they won $225,000 on the first day of the event, and apparently it was cracked within 24 hours. So I wanted to open up a little bit of a discussion about phone security. And Matt, do you think your phone's secure? Do you act like it is when you use it?
Do I act like it? Yeah, I act like it. But really, who am I, right? Like, remember last week we talked about Donald Trump's iPhone getting hacked by the Chinese and the Russians, and they both said, yeah, we do it, right? I mean, if you're a high profile individual, then yeah, you should be concerned. Personally, what do I use my phone for? Yeah, I use it at work, but really, who's going to be like, oh, let's see what project Matt's working on now, right? Like, I I think that they are easy to hack, absolutely. And I am kind of surprised that different companies, especially the large giant ones, allow us to bring our phones. I remember when cameras first showed up on cell phones, and it was a big deal. And I had one of the first Windows mobile devices that actually had
Oh,
a
yeah.
camera on it. And I remember my boss looked at it and he freaked out because I had a camera on my phone and I could go around and take pictures like some kind of a spy of all of our drawings and projects we were working on. Like, I was like, I don't know why you're freaking out so much. And they actually passed a rule, our corporation, it was a major corporation, and they passed a rule that you weren't allowed to have a phone with a camera on it. And this was during the BlackBerry craze, and BlackBerries didn't have cameras at first.
Really?
Yeah, and BlackBerries were known to be far more secure, and they were far more secure. And that was kind of the reason of why corporations went with BlackBerry as opposed to iPhones and when Android came out. So I guess it would be interesting to compare if BlackBerry was still around, what type of security features they would have. But
Well,
yeah,
people are doing their online banking all the time. I know
yes,
I even do Bitcoin transactions on my phone. I have PDFs that I pull up that maybe could be a little more secure. My social media documents on Google Drive that I use. I mean, all of those things technically could be compromised by hackers. And these people in Tokyo did it under 24 hours with all of the latest phones, all of the latest software. I mean, we think if we update our software, we're secure, but we're not.
I
And
agree.
I think
Yeah.
this is a good time to remind listeners that maybe your mobile phone's not the right place to have sensitive information on it, like banking and money. And
And photos if you're a celebrity.
that's right. Or even if you're not.
But banking is an interesting one. I think I'm going to look into this hackathon that happened that you're talking about here and just see like what kinds of aspects of the phone were they able to hack into, because I love how easy it is to do my banking on my phone. I deposit checks on my phone by signing the back and taking pictures. It uses my fingerprint to access my app on my phone. I send email transfers all the time. I mean, when was the last time I stepped into a bank? Years ago.
I'll tell you what, people are still stepping into the banks here in California. The other day I had to wait 45 minutes in line. Wah, wah. But you're right. It sure is convenient. But if somebody stole your phone and if they were able to hack it and get into those
Bypass the
directories,
fingerprint. Yeah.
yeah, where your CIBC account is or whatever it is that you use, they might be able to find some information. And but it's not the end of the world. I mean, we're not big corporations, but I still think you think you're secure and you're really not. I think there's a lot of things we don't know about who can access our things, um, including our cameras and our microphones. And did you know that Mark Zuckerberg actually covers his camera with tape?
Yes. I actually saw that. So I saw a picture and I saw the tape and I thought, oh, he's one of those paranoid people, because lots of people do it. And it just seems to be that like older people tend to have the tape over it, not necessarily the younger generation. But but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it doesn't matter what generation you are, more of us are becoming paranoid about people hacking and using our software and our hardware. And one of my biggest concerns are self-driving cars. I mean, that's another debate we can get into. Like, what if somebody takes over your car? Do they kidnap you and take you to where they want?
Why am I driving to Mexico?
Yeah, or have you drive off a cliff? Like, there's all kinds of concerns there. So security, I mean, it's a multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar industry, and it's just going to get bigger as the Internet of Things happens through 5G.
It's so interesting that all this money being spent on security is because we can't trust people. It's too bad, right? We could save so much
Yeah,
money as a society if people were just honest.
a real
Um,
shame.
Now, this week, something kind of sad happened.
Yeah.
Comic book genius Stan Lee, Spider-Man creator, died at 95. He actually passed away at Cedar-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, not too far from me. Tell me what you know about Stan Lee.
Well, I don't know a lot about Stan Lee, but he's been the face of Marvel Comics definitely since the 70s, and especially since they started the movies. And it's a big empire, these Marvel movies. And they've been the highest grossing movies every year. And now they're like releasing 4, 5, 6 of them a year, and they keep bringing in the money. I mean, not even Star Wars can keep up. Star Wars people are getting tired of, and they're calling it Star Wars fatigue. And we were getting maybe 2 a year, and we're already tired. But yet, for some reason, we keep coming back to these comic books. And Stan Lee was the main driving force behind it. In fact, did you know that Marvel Comics came really close to declaring bankruptcy in the 90s?
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so when Disney bought them, they actually got a pretty good deal from them. And I think Disney bought them after Stan Lee convinced people to start the movies and get these movies going and to kind of reboot our love of comic books. I don't know about you, Dan, but when I was like 10, 11 years old, I loved going to the Sherwood Park Mall and I went to
Uh-huh.
the comic store and I loved buying comics. And I remember like it was Thursdays, all the new comics came in, and I would just listen to the older comic book teenagers and men just talking about, oh, the latest Fantastic Four is in. Ooh, here's the new Silver Surfer, and
Ooh.
yeah.
I still have a vivid memory of me collecting for our newspaper route and having a $50 Canadian bill. And the
Oh
comic
yeah.
book store was closed. But they had a
No.
glass window and I like showed the man inside. I have $50. He's like, I'm not opening the door.
You wouldn't do it even with
No.
the $50.
But
That's a
I was a
great
10-year-old
story.
kid that was about to be very unwise with $50. Where if I had invested it in the stock market, it would be like 10,000 right now.
And if you had bought Bitcoin,
Yes. It would have gone up and then down.
up and then down, but still way more. Yeah,
Well, I
so
wanted to talk about a
yeah.
couple of things. First of all, Stan Lee, he was famous for Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk, one of the top writers at Marvel. He's considered the architect of the contemporary comic book. And I
Yes.
was reading Reddit the other day, and one thing that somebody said was that, really, he's the writer of modern mythology because
Oh,
we all know about Zeus, we know about all of those things
yeah.
from Greek mythology, but in 200, 300 years, people are going to know about Spider-Man, they're going to know about Thor, they're going to know about the Fantastic Four. It literally is modern mythology.
I love that. That's great. And look at the money that we spend, and we're maybe not placing dead lambs and food on the altars of our mythic gods, but we are spending trillions of dollars on this modern mythology. So yeah, that's a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the movies.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting trend for me to watch. I don't know if you remember in the late 80s, early 90s, Westerns were kind of the big thing. And
Yeah.
now nobody's really into Westerns. And so I wonder, are we on a trend where we're watching superhero movies and then maybe in 20 years it's going to go away like the Western? You
Yeah, you
know?
look at the kids in the 60s, right? And they were all wearing their little cowboy hats and vests and their little deputy stars. And yeah, I mean, look at kids today. They're all like Halloween. Kids are knocking on my door dressed like the Hulk and Spider-Man. And, like it is. It's definitely a trend. How long can it last? I don't know. But man, it is bank and Disney is cashing.
One thing that I think is really interesting is that movie theaters even still exist.
Yeah.
Um, because we have Netflix, we have Hulu, we have Amazon Prime, and we all have these huge televisions in our homes that are pretty cheap. I mean, this one was, maybe $300, and
Yeah.
everyone has really good access to new movies. You can pop your popcorn at home. If you got your dog, you can have them jump up on your lap. It's private, everything's fine.
Yeah.
You go into the movie theater, you got to drive there, you got to park. It's $15. I mean, I can't believe in 2018 we're still doing it. And I think we're doing it because, like you said, people are really into, superheroes and really into Star Wars. And it's a little bit of nostalgia to go with friends and wait in line. And it's just fascinating to me that in the Internet of Things, we're
Yeah.
still lining up at a movie theater like it's 1980, right?
Well, I like how you said it's like 1980. I remember, was it 82 when ET came out? And that was the year
I was born. Yeah.
I was gonna say
Thanks for
maybe
telling everyone how old I am. I'm
yeah, and his
36.
birthday is Maytember 28th. So anyways, I remember
Lousy
standing in
May
line.
timber weather. What's that?
And we were lined up around the block, and I remember standing with mom and dad and Joe and Nicole was there, and mom was probably pregnant with you, and ET came out, and we were in the rain, and we just couldn't wait to go see ET. So I don't know, Dan, there's something about seeing a movie in the theaters, and the way I rank movies is the top rank, that's a great movie, is a theater movie. That's a movie I have to see in the theaters. Now, there are some movies that I will say are amazing and spectacular, but they're not a theater movie unless there's a technical component to them, like a big soundtrack, explosions, like big, wonderful, beautiful scenes. Those are theater movies.
French horns like crazy.
Horses. For
Horses.
our listeners, Dan doesn't like watching any movie with horses. It's kind of the thing that he's
It's
chosen.
my litmus test. If there's French horns and horses, I'm not into it.
Yeah, so no Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves for
No.
Dan. There's horses and French horns in that movie.
Well, I wanted to have a little bit of a debate with you.
Are we gonna do this like a rap battle?
Yeah, except for I'm terrible at rapping. I wanted to discuss which is better,
Yeah.
Android or iPhone, and I'm gonna be iPhone, and you're gonna
All
be
right.
Android. So go.
That's
How come Android's better? What do you think?
All right, drop a beat, Dan. Just kidding. I'm not good at rap battle. Maybe if I thought about this in advance, I could have put a nice little rap to it. So Android, why do I love Android? I've got to tell you, it's probably the customization of Android, the openness of Android, the ability to move files on and off, all the things that come in Android phones. You want an Android phone that's cheap? Buy a cheap Android phone. You want an Android phone that has additional memory so that you can put tons of movies and photos and videos on it? You get an Android phone. You want a phone where you can make it beep at you and do all kinds of different things when you're looking upside down or left or right? Android will let you do that. So customization, the freedom to do what you want with it, and the ability to buy the phone that is right for you. In fact, let me give you a good example. So mom said to me last night, and remember when you were on the phone with us, and she said, I want to know what phone is best for me. So for our listeners, our mother is in her late 60s, and she is not very into technology, and so she just wants a simple phone. Well, if she wants a simple phone that's not very expensive, it's going to be Android.
Oh, that's interesting that you said Android because I think an iPhone would be better for mom, and here's the reason why.
Drop it down. This is the debate.
All
Which
right.
phone is better for mom?
I think it's just been planned out way better. They had the top minds of their field figure out a design that looks great. It's going to fit well in her pocket. She's going to turn it on. She doesn't need to know how to configure anything. She just presses a button to turn it on and it just works. And it's beautiful. And that's what I think would really appeal to mom about that. Look, with my iPhone, I can easily share contacts and pictures with AirDrop. And I don't know about you, but I find most of the people that I hang around with have iPhones. And so after a hike or after, going to Disneyland, it's so much easier to just open our phones and share photos that way.
But it's not that easy to share with an Android person, is it?
That is correct.
Whereas Android
let's
can
hear
share
your rebuttal
with-
on that. How do you share the photos? Are you using Google or what are you doing?
Yeah, Google Photos is awesome. It works on Android and it works on iOS. And I love it. So here's another question. All right. So I will concede the fact that iOS is simpler to use. There's no question about it. But it's becoming more and more difficult to use, especially on the iPhone XS. So you get the iPhone Xs and that home button's gone. So now there's all the gestures and the flicks and it's got to be flicked just right and it's got to be gestured just right. So I feel like as iPhone is trying to compete with Android's functionality, they're trying to simplify by removing buttons. I think they've kind of created they've moved away from the simplicity that they were known for. And then here's the other problem is the price, right? You to get something that's affordable for mom, um, something that if she's only going to use it as a cell phone and then, occasional web browsing and Netflix, uh, you're going to be buying a really old iPhone. And the problem with those really old iPhones is they're not supported anymore. And what drove me crazy when I had an old iPhone is all of a sudden an app will stop working and it will say download the latest app. Oh, this latest app isn't available on your iPhone. And
Ah.
one of my best apps just stopped working because it just wouldn't work on my old iPhone, even though it did for years.
Well, I do want to talk about the App Store. You may have a point there, but I personally think with iPhone, the App Store is so much more clean and secure, because they have such a big vetting process and it's easy to find what you want. It's a well-designed App Store. And,
Yeah.
quite frankly, people use it more often and spend more money on it too. So if you're a developer, you're going to make more money making games for the Apple iPhone store.
Well, there's no
Some
question it's far more secure than Apple Play. And we've talked about that too. And, a bit of the functionality of an Android is that you can actually sideload apps from anywhere you want, but then that leaves you open to malware, and you've got to really trust the source of where you're getting your app from.
One thing that I really like about the iPhone space is iMessage. Really, there's just nothing that compares with it on the
Hmm.
Android side. When I had Android for 3 years recently, I tried everything. Google had a text messenger. Samsung has a text messenger. I downloaded some third-party ones that I thought would, work well. But it just was so disorganized and frustrating when people sent me group text sometimes from an iPhone. It just came really weird and sometimes in multiple
Yep.
messages, broken up. One thing that I like about iMessage is when you send it to people, you can tell when they receive it. So there's never
Hmm.
a question about it. On my laptop, I can send iMessages too, which is very convenient to people's cell phone numbers, not to like an email address or some
Yep.
kind of a Gtalk account. It's actually to their phone number.
Google
Um,
Messenger now does that too, but it's an actual web page. I believe it's messages.google.com, and you have to log in with your Gmail account. But yeah, I totally hear you. iMessage is fantastic, and Android and iOS, as far as messaging, is working better now. But what I found is you need to have a newer Android phone. So I think it was more on the Android side was they created something that was compatible with iMessage, not necessarily Apple saying let's work well with Android, because I don't think they would ever do that.
no. But I mean, the problem is it's not standard across the board. You open up an iPhone, it doesn't matter if it's an iPhone 5 or a 10s.
Yep.
You're using iMessage, and when you text somebody, you know whether they received it or not. When you group text people, it's obvious. It's just so much more organized. If you're on Android, it's totally different if you're on a Xiaomi phone than on a Samsung phone, than on a Google phone, Nexus phone. Everything is different text messengers,
Hmm.
and you can get lost in the messages.
That's
And
why I like the vanilla Android experience. In fact, on my Samsung S9 Plus, I actually use the Google Messages, not the Samsung Messenger app. And it may play well with iOS and iMessage as well, but I just like to keep the experience the same.
right. Okay, that's a good point. Um, I like iCloud as well. It backs up all of my messages. It backs up my photos. That's one thing I really like about the iPhone. Is there anything else you like about the Android before our battle royale is finished?
Um, iCloud, I have mixed thoughts on that one. Sharon uses an iPhone, and her iCloud, her phone is always full. And she's constantly removing photos and trying to upload photos to iCloud, and iCloud is syncing all these different apps, and you got to pay more to be able to use iCloud. I mean, she doesn't use a lot. And yet her phone is constantly telling her to delete things and iCloud is full and pay more money. Whereas Android, especially with my photos and videos, everything's in Google Photos. So I've now set up Google Photos on her iPhone and she no longer has those issues because it automatically syncs. And it really is a great app. In fact, I would argue that Google's apps are some of the best, and you can use them on iOS or you can use them on Android, but they're made specifically for Android. And if you use Google's apps, you know they're going to be great. Just look at Google Maps. Google Maps is way better and has constantly outperformed Maps on iOS.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, it is fantastic.
I can't tell
So,
you how many times I've used Apple's map software and gone to like a weird warehouse. Is this where the party is? No.
no, but we're just burying the bodies out back.
Yeah, you got me there, Matt. I mean, Google Photos is the way to go. I always buy the smallest iPhone in size
Yep.
because I know that most people fill up their hard drive with photos. And for me, I delete all of my photos on my phone and just upload them the same day. And so I have tons of space on my phone all the time.
Yeah. So
And
why bother? Yeah.
the only thing that I don't love about Google Photos is my live pictures, which you can use with the Apple phone. You know, where it kind of moves in a Harry Potter style.
Oh, those are cool. I like those.
They're cool, but when you look them up on Google Photos, it's weird. It's like a video and there's sound, and it's just not very well integrated yet.
Oh,
But
there's
that could be
sound on
something
it.
that could be upgraded soon.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're divided here. I'm on Team Apple. Matt, you're on Team Android.
Team A, Android.
Yeah. We'd love to hear what you have to say. If you're on YouTube, please comment below and tell us if you like Apple or Android better. And we might take some of your points and talk about it next week. If you're on the podcast, you can comment on our blog on our website at backco.com, or you can actually use Twitter. Shout out us at Tech Time Show PC. And you can also send us an Instagram message, and we'd love to hear back from you. If you are listening to our podcast, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.